You know, the curious thing about this current referendum is that the referendum question is a choice between two voting systems, our existing system and the alternative, the single transferable vote, STV. But what's interesting is no one's defending the current system. There is no campaign for first past the post, the existing system. And that's funny, because the whole reason that we're having this conversation, the whole reason you're watching this video right now, the whole reason we're going to have this vote in this historic referendum is because of the failings of our current system. It was these bizarre results in '96 and 2001 that we're having this discussion at all. So why aren't we talking about the current system? Why isn't someone defending it if they think it's so great? Interestingly, we have two campaigns. One is yes STV and the other's no STV. So, in other words, they are saying the debate is simply about the alternative. They're not even prepared to defend the current system. I think that's a bit suspicious. People should be asking some pretty strong questions about our existing system. People should be saying to the no STV group, by implication, you're saying our current system's okay. Why? Why do you think the current system's okay? How do you defend a system that doesn't accurately represent what people say with their votes? How do you defend a system that allows a minority to get a majority of the power and rule uninterrupted for a long period of time? How do you defend those things? How do you defend them as democratic? I think those are good questions that should be asked. I'm not sure that the no STV side is prepared to answer them. Another issue that we hear from the no side is that with these new multi-member ridings, people will not have a local member. There'll be no local representation, they claim, because the ridings are so big. Well, that's an interesting question, because, of course, on the one hand, it begs the question about how well served people feel under the current system. I mean, we know that people elect parties mostly. The individual candidate doesn't really factor in, even when people say it does. We know from studying voter behavior that it's not the most important thing. People are voting on the basis of the party choice that they want. How much local accountability are they getting? Well, if you're with the party that won that local riding, you might be getting some accountability. But if you didn't, come on. You know, we know that if a New Democrat goes up to a liberal MLA, you know, it's the one that got elected in their riding and says, hey, I want you to go in the House and argue for the policies I believe in. What's that liberal going to do? They're not going to do that. And it's going to be the same for the New Democrats. The Democrats aren't going to go in there and lobby for what their local liberal supporting people do. So they're not getting much accountability at all. Now, under STV, many of those people, for the first time, would actually have a representative that would listen to what they have to say and champion it in the House on the stuff that matters, the policies, the things that divide us as British Columbians. The thing that I tell people about looking at voting systems is that it's really about performance. If you went to Ireland and asked the people there, how does STV work? Almost nobody could tell you how. But twice the people of Ireland have voted to keep STV. Why? Because they like the performance. They like the kind of political results that STV regularly produces. You know, think about any kind of sophisticated purchase you have to make, a car, a computer. I mean, do you open up the back of the computer and look at the hardware? Do you open up the hood and say, nice spark plugs? Of course not. You think about the performance. You say, what am I going to use this computer for? What am I going to use this car for? Is it going to get the results that I need? And it's exactly the same with the voting system. You as a voter need to ask yourself, is this voting system going to produce the results that I think we should have in a democracy? And if you can get a sense of what the two systems do that way, you've got the information you need to make an informed choice on May 12th. I mean, another thing that we hear from the no side is that STV can't be a very good system because not many countries use it. They'll talk about how at a federal level, at a national level, Ireland is a country that uses STV. Tiny island of Malta uses it. And Australia uses it, has used it at the national level for the Senate. Arguably today, the system is not really like STV as it was originally designed. STV is used at the subnational level in Australia for state governments. But not really very many places. It's not the most popular PR system. And the no side said, see, there's more evidence. STV, why are we going with a system that no one likes? Of course, what they neglect to mention is why. Why is the system not very popular? Well, it's not very popular with politicians. And politicians are the people who get to make the decision, typically. It's not very typical that the public gets to make this decision. Normally, voting systems are chosen by politicians. And politicians choose systems that work the best for them. Not surprisingly, STV, because it has such a competitive dynamic, the parties don't like it. And that is the reason it hasn't been chosen. So the public has to ask itself, do you want a system designed by politicians, approved by politicians, kept in place by politicians? Or do you want a system, as we are proposed here in BC, designed by citizens, chosen by citizens, the Citizens Assembly of BC? Which one do you think is going to work better for citizens? You know, if we look at the history of Western industrialized countries, we don't find the voters at the center of the discussions about how their democracy will be organized. Elites make those decisions. Parties make those decisions. But when voters have had a chance to influence the process, they've almost always insisted on some form of proportional representation, some form of proportionality in the results. They almost never choose to have our system. I mean, it's interesting, we've seen a lot of change in the last 25 years. We've seen the Eastern Bloc become democratic. We've seen South Africa come back to democracy. We've seen Latin American countries return from authoritarianism to democracy. Did any of them choose our voting system? No. Zero. Zero chose our system. When those elites or those voters could have some influence over the kind of political system they wanted, all of them said, give us some form of proportional representation. We've heard some critics of STV suggest that one of the reasons we don't want to go down this route is because if we get it and it doesn't work, we'll be stuck with it. You know, there'll be no way to change it. You know, once it's in, it'll be entrenched, and then what? What do we do then? Well, again, I don't think there's a lot of evidence to support that view. When we look at comparative voting system reform, what we find is it's a lot more likely that you'll have institutional changes, minor voting system reforms within a form of PR than you will under any other system. So if STV is in place and we think that aspects of it need to be altered, changed, we'll be able to do that. I think the comparative evidence suggests we don't need to worry that if we adopt STV, we won't be able to fix it later on. You know, really, the results, broadly speaking, are very similar between STV and MMP in terms of the competition, in terms of the end of voting majority governments. That's really where the action is. And if you want to see the change, that's the kind of change you'll see. STV will give you that result, just like MMP. But you know, there's another strand to my response to people who say, I prefer a different system, I'm going to wait until I get that option. You're not going to get that option. I mean, if there's one thing I know, it's the history of voting system reform. I've looked at every example of Western industrialized voting system reform over the 20th century. It is an incredibly rare event. The voting system is one of the most powerful instruments to alter the nature of politics, and it's why politicians protect it so much. They almost never let the voters have a look in on this particular question. This is an historic opening to our political system. Don't blow it. Don't think that you're going to get another chance later on. I'm going to wait until I can get exactly what I want. This is the opportunity. Seize it, or you're going to regret it later.